So a couple of YouTubers reached out to me recently and asked me if I'd be interested in making a video together sharing some stories about work and the like. And I was like, no. I work in retail, where people are completely normal, respectful and mannerly, and I'd never be able to think of a good story to share. They said okay, and we parted ways. Could you imagine? No, I've plenty to draw from, so here we are. I'll get the ball rolling. So I'm currently working in a retail company that buys and sells used games, DVDs, phones, laptops and other kind of similar stuff. It's called Complete Entertainment Exchange, or SEX as they like to call it, because that's not a joke an 8-year-old would make and could never possibly get old. I'd love to have been there when they decided to name it. So Mr. CEO, we've invested millions of euros into this global company that will be providing many services to families and young children, and the investors would like to know what we're going to call this new business.
We'll call it SEX.
We can't call it SEX, Mr. CEO. That's a ridiculous thing to name a serious company. We might as well just call it Big Soppin' Fannies. We'd never get that cleared. You can't just roll on up with a shop called Sex.
Okay, then we'll call it SEX, but with a C then.
Now that's just brilliant. That addresses all of my concerns directly. It's not all bad though, because technically your boy Ducky is a sex worker. So one day I was working there, I was in a particularly disgruntled mood, more so than usual that is, because I was with a customer who wanted to trade in a PS4, and they told me with a straight face that it was barely used. And then they proceeded to present a PS4 to me that looked like it had just returned from NAM. This PS4 had a hard life. Granted, the customer was probably half right. It probably was barely used as a gaming console, but it certainly had a lot of miles on it for an anal thermometer. About 10 minutes later, while I was still trying to chisel 6 years of dried in piss and shit off the front of a PS4, I heard the unmistakable sound of angry high heels approach the counter. Now, everyone in retail knows what this is without looking. This is a customer, probably called Sharon. She wears this haircut, she's in her late 30s to mid 40s, she's got some heated choice words for you, and she's currently holding something she's about to slam down on the counter for dramatic effect before asking you an angry question with no context. And sure enough, I was bang on. Up she came, slammed a pair of wireless headphones down on the counter and said,
"What do you call this?"
Now, a lot of you know me well enough at this stage to know how I take aggression from customers, and if you don't, well, needless to say, I do take it personally and I will retaliate with twice the fury. But if I did this every time off the bat, I wouldn't hold a job very long. So initially I gave Sharon here the benefit of the doubt. Maybe her anger and belittling behaviour was justified. I don't know it's not. Well, I do know it's not. How much of a negative impact can a pair of wireless headphones have on your life? Unless you were attempting to strangle somebody with them Hitman style and you didn't think it through. Anyway, so rather than meeting her aggression with my aggression, I maintained retail mode and asked her what the problem was and how I can help her with it. And she said, hold on, just going to get my best Sharon impression here.
Meow, 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 entitled. Meow, 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 how dare you? Meow, 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 disgusting.
I'll translate for those who don't speak Sharon. She said, my elderly mother was in here yesterday looking to purchase some headphones, and a staff member who was working there at the time sold her some wireless headphones. And she is very old and has no clue on how to use them because she's old, and how dare us take advantage of an old woman who is old and didn't know? And how could she be expected to know how to use technology because she's old? And how it's so disgusting that we do that for the sake of a sale. That's pretty much exactly what she said. Now, I wasn't working the day before, so I was a bit out of the loop on this one. But I do know 2 things. 1, we don't get paid commission, so we don't try push sales on people. Whether you buy something or not means Fanny Adams to our wages at the end of the month. And 2, she was blowing her top on somebody who had nothing to do with the transaction, so she probably wasn't the most stable source of information. So I told her to wait there a second and I'll ask somebody who was working yesterday what the real story was. Thankfully my manager was there and he was working the day before and knew all about the whole thing. What actually happened was an older woman did indeed come into the shop looking for a pair of headphones, and a staff member had told her, unfortunately, we don't have any normal wired headphones in stock at the moment, that all we had was wireless headphones. Curious about the wireless headphones, the elderly woman pressed the staff member about them. The staff member obliged by explaining what they are and showing how they work, even giving her a demo of them, wherein the old woman decided she'd actually like to buy them, as she thinks it would be amazing, as she likes to potter around the house listening to some drum and bass without worrying about wires. I made that last bit up about drum and bass. She was more of a German dungeon techno kind of gal, so they were sold to her. The reason the manager knows this so well is because he knew, like most elderly people, she'd forget absolutely everything that was explained to her the second she left the shop and would be back to return them this very day. So with all the details, I went back to Sharon, and assuming her anger was from thinking that she couldn't return the headphones, I told her that there was no problem returning the headphones, that we had more or less expected them to be returned anyway. But no, that wasn't actually her problem at all. Her problem was that we had even sold the headphones to her mother to begin with. So I calmly explained to her that none of us working here currently practice hypnosis. If she decided she wanted them, that decision was was made of her own free will. But she doesn't take in any of this, and she just keeps going on about her poor mother. Now, I'm not going to lie, my retail smile started to twitch in the corners a little bit at this point, but I was almost done processing the refund, so it was almost over. But then she uttered the line that completely shattered any professionalism I was trying to maintain. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You should be ashamed of yourselves." I stopped what I was doing. I put my hands on the counter, leaned forward and locked eyes with her, and I said, "What are you doing?" Now, I don't think she was ready for this. She wanted to ridicule a robot, not be confronted by a person. But rather than taking on board this warning shot I just gave her, she doubled down. She said,
Meow, 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 meow.
again, I'll translate.
You should be ashamed of yourselves. Selling a poor old woman something she'd have no clue on how to use. She's old. She can't be expected to know how to use technology, and I think you're all despicable for what she'd done.
At this point I did snap. I just saw red. So I said to her, "Firstly, if you actually just opened your ears and listened to me instead of throwing a tantrum like a child, I explained that we didn't force her to buy anything. She decided she wanted them. Second, you call her a defenseless old woman. I call her an adult capable of making her own decisions. And seeing as she didn't have any kind of carer with her, I assume she's mentally capable of doing that. And lastly, we can't refuse to sell items to people based on what they look like, how old they are, or how capable they seem. That's called discrimination. Now, you can stand there and continue to moan about this until the two of us drop dead, or you can knock it off so I can process this refund and we can both get out of each other's lives. How's that sound? Imagine my joy when she put her back to me and then proceeded to shut the fuck up. I then processed the refund, handed her back her money, and of course, now that this was all done, she was free to make remarks once again, which was rather predictably,
I won't be coming back here again.
wherein I locked eyes with her once again and asked her if that was a promise. And then she stormed off.
Hello, I am just a robot, and I want to thank Ducky for letting me on his channel. He is an extremely underrated YouTuber who I have a lot of respect for. He is one of the most original channels I have ever seen, and yes, I understand that his art style is very similar to Yahtzee's from Zero Punctuation, but there's a difference between inspiration and ripoff. If Ducky had a yellow background and was talking about game reviews in the same style Yahtzee does them in, then he would be a ripoff. But Ducky doesn't just take Yahtzee's art style and wallows in it, he uses it as a jumping off point. In my humble opinion, Ducky is far more comparable to a storytime animator than Yahtzee, but I think I've sucked him off long enough to get on his channel. Allow me to share a few stories from my job as a security bot. Now, security is a fantastic job, or at least I feel like that 95% of the time. You see, security is mostly just walking around pretending that you're keeping an eye on people, but every now and then, you have to do something, and it almost always happens towards the end of your shift. First, I'll go over to two things that are not so bad. Number one is false alarms. This is when an idiot who doesn't know the first thing about the law comes up to you and tells you that there's a problem. This may not sound so bad, but let me give you an example. In the middle of summer, which is extremely hot considering I'm in Texas, a woman told me that there was a child alone in a vehicle, and that the windows weren't rolled down. She pointed out which car it was, and I ran up to it. As I got closer, I realized two things. One, the car was on and the AC was blasting, and two, which is even more important, the child was a full-grown man. Now granted, this is not a huge mistake. In fact, we've all made it. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I mistook a guy relaxing in his car with a baby being cooked alive. And the second minor issue I have to deal with almost every single day is someone asking me if I can jumpstart their car for them. I'm a security bot, I'm not a mechanic. Well, let me tell you this, I drive a Prius. If I try to jumpstart your car, it's just gonna die. But now it's time to get into the worst part about being a security bot. And to all my security buddies at home, you know what I'm going to say, the homeless people. Although now in the States we have to call them transients. Why do we call them transients and not homeless people? Well, the answer is obvious. Homeless aren't people. And if you know anything about transients, you know they're some of the worst liars ever. I met one who was harassing people at an Outback Steakhouse, demanding free food. I told him he had to leave the premises or I would call the police. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, as security, we don't really have any power whatsoever. We just tell people to leave, and if they don't, then we call the police. And he told me, I'm not even joking here, that he was the CEO of Outback Steakhouse and was going to get me fired. I don't even know what goes through transients' minds when they lie. Like, are they trying to be believable? There was another one who pulled out an invisible gun and threatened to shoot me. But by far the worst time was when I was working in a shopping center overnight and was told to make sure that no transients were sleeping there. I caught a woman sleeping in front of a nail salon and I told her she had to leave. But I was going to give her an hour to wake up and get all her stuff together. The transient woman asked me if I was going to call the police. I told her there was no need for that and I was going to give her time. And And do you know what this bitch told me? She said that if I call the police and they show up, she was going to tell them that I molested her. Now, I was infuriated. I was practically a child compared to this fat, disgusting 40-year-old woman. So I started dialing the police, the non-emergency number and not 911. By the way, people, if you want to call the police and you don't have an emergency, please dial the non-emergency number. She then asked me, "What are you doing? I thought you said you would give me an hour to leave." Yeah, well, that went right out the window as soon as you decided to falsely accuse me of molestation. She then told me the police were going to lock me up forever, and I told her I'd take my chances. After that, she finally left. But by far the worst transient I've ever had to deal with was down by the border. So I was doing security at a Jack in the Box, and one of the employees told me there was a homeless guy doing heroin in the bathroom. So I went in there, and oh my god, I've been in a lot of public bathrooms before, but this one was by far the worst. The homeless guy still had the heroin needle stuck in his arm, and his face was in the toilet. I told him he had to go, and he stood up, took out a pocket knife, stabbed his own cheek with it, moved it down, and then he started swinging his blood-covered knife at me while screaming, "I have AIDS, I have AIDS." Needless to say, I ran out of there and dialed 911. Guess what happened? No phone service. I was too close to the fucking border. Eventually, the guy passed out from blood loss, and I assumed the heroin in his system didn't help, and then me and another guard picked him up and dumped him on an abandoned train track. So yes, security may seem very easy at first, but it has many difficult parts, especially the constant disrespect I get. But I will say that the job is also rewarding. Not too long ago, I was doing security at an H-E-B, and a man had a diabetic seizure and crashed into a bush behind the store. He was shaking back and forth and his doors were locked. I called 911, police officers and an ambulance showed up and they got him out of there safely. So yeah, I might have saved a life. And that is why I'd rather be a security officer than working at a cashier. Bye Ducky, thanks for letting me be on your channel.
Having worked in retail for most of my adult life, I've seen my fair share of crazy and outright moronic things. But there will always be one instance that has continued to stand out in my mind, even after all these years. Back when I worked as a beauty advisor at Walgreens, I was finishing up my closing duties and was wandering around the department, tidying up various odds and ends to kill time before I was supposed to leave for the night. It was probably about 10 p.m. and I was cleaning my register when this older-looking gentleman, probably mid to late 60s, comes in. Naturally, I welcomed him and asked him if he needed help finding anything. He responded with a yes, that he was looking for the family planning and feminine products. Now, you would think that such things would fall under the pharmacy's jurisdiction, but that's where you'd be dead wrong. That fell under the beauty department, and thus to me by association. Thinking that he was just looking for something for his daughter, I smiled and lead him back to what he requested. But no, he didn't go for the pads and tampons like I initially thought. He instead made a beeline for the condoms, lube, and other sexy assistance products that we carried, all the while explaining about how it was date night for him and his girlfriend, and that they were headed back to his place for a steamy night in. He continued in saying that due to his age, he couldn't quite perform the way he used to in the bedroom, and was specifically looking for a personal massager for his girlfriend to supplement with not a single ounce of shame or embarrassment to him. He was all confidence and pride. Now, I've barely spoken to this man for 2 minutes, and I'm already feeling extremely uncomfortable. But, against my better judgment, I maintained my best customer service composure and showed him the 2 types we carried. Now, obviously, this is still a family-oriented shop. Any sex toys we carried had to be very discreet, and packaged in a similar manner. However, both boxes had a Velcro flap that could be opened to reveal the product inside. Both massages were the same brand, with the only real difference in them being size. I show these to the gentleman, and he briefly compares the 2, opening each flap to inspect the discreet but still unmistakably phallic-shaped objects inside. And after he made his decision, the words that left his lips will forever haunt me. He looked me dead in the eye with a smile on his face, and said to me,
"Well, you know what they say, sweetheart. Go big or go home."
And proceeded to the front register with his prize to check out in return to his date night. Shortly afterward, my coworker came around the corner laughing her ass off because she had heard the whole interaction, from where she was sweeping the next aisle over. Meanwhile, I'm still rooted in place trying to process what the actual fuck just transpired in those few short minutes. I'll never forget that, man. Godspeed, you unashamed bastard. Godspeed.
So what can be learned from these work stories? Well, always ask an old one her daughter's name before you decide to sell her anything. Old men have the anal cavity of a bag for life. Come on, he's not fooling anyone with that girlfriend story. He was shoving it up his bum. And calling an ambulance on somebody having a seizure is the single most effective way to help yourself forget about that time you left a homeless man bleed to death at a train station. Oh, I'm just taking the piss. In all seriousness though, I want to thank Serpent and Just a Robot for popping in and sharing their stories with the single most quacked audience on the internet. Just a Robot makes commentary, political and anime theory types of videos, and he's doing quite well for himself, so if that tickles your intrigue, you know where to find the link to his channel. Serpent has a small YouTube channel, but I don't think she's quite nailed down what she wants to do yet, but I'll link that below anyway so you guys can pop over and show your support. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you lads and ladies in the next one.